Hi devs, in this video we are going to build a Dockerized Django application with Redis, Celery and Postgres. Actually it's a new year right now and I'm recording this video, and Happy New Year for each one of you. I wish you all of the best in 2021. I hope this pandemic will end. Anyway, okay, so basically the main idea in this video is to configure Django with Docker containers, especially with Redis and Celery. It's a bit hard to find complete solution on the internet, so majority of them didn't work for me. Anyway, at the end of this tutorial, you will able to create your own asynchronous apps easily by using the initial configuration of this project. Before starting, you will need a basic understanding of Django, Docker and Celery to run some important commands. Also, please subscribe to channel. I'm not publishing here common tutorials like how to start Python or Django. This is too common content, but we are doing impossible programming here. We are finding solutions to real-world problems. So that's why I really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel and follow me on IG. And of course, feel free to ask me anything about programming on Instagram as well. I'm always happy to help you. So let's get started. Step 1. Add a Docker file. Start by creating an empty directory named Docker Django Redis Celery. It's a really long name. You can name it differently, but for this tutorial I will keep it like that. And create another new directory named app inside it. Next, we will add required dependencies and let's include them inside requirements.txt. And let's just define which versions we need. For instance, Django version will above 2.2 and so on. These versions is just to make sure that they are not outdated. So this part is actually very simple. Then we create a new file named Dockerfile inside the project. We are going to add basic configuration here, and especially for Postgres because, as you know, it requires additional dependencies for a successful build. So initially, we are using Python 3.7 Alpine, which is a very lightweight image and highly recommended to keep the size as small as possible. And usually it's safe in terms of compatibility. And below that, you see we used Python unbuffered environment variable, which means that the Python output is transmitted directly to the terminal without being buffered, and that allows to displaying the application's output in real time. It also means that there is no partial output in a buffer in case the Python program fails. Next, we are going to install our dependencies by copying our requirements.txt into the Docker image, then we will run the pip command to start the installation later in this file. Alright, in order to interact with Postgres, we need to install PostgreSQL client. And to achieve that, we can use the package manager that comes with Alpine. We are going to add a package by using update option, which means update the registry before adding it. And no cache option is not storing the registry index on our Docker file. The reason for including these options is to minimize the number of extra files and packages that are added to our Docker container. This is the best practice for keeping the smallest footprints possible in our application, and it also doesn't include any extra dependencies in the system which may cause unexpected side effects, or it may even create security vulnerabilities. So now that we have this package, we are going to install some temporary packages that need to be installed on the system while we run our requirements. And then we can remove them after the installation finished. This is all part of making sure that our Docker file has the absolute minimal footprints possible, and we won't keep extra dependencies in our Docker file unless they are absolutely necessary. The virtual option here sets up an alias for our dependencies that we can use to easily remove all those dependencies later. Then we list out all of the temporary dependencies that are required for installing the Postgres client. Next, we are going to make a directory with a Docker image that we can use to store our application source code. Basically, it creates an empty folder on our Docker image, and then it switches to that as a default directory, or let's say working directory. So any application we are using our Docker container will run from this location. It copies the app directory from our local machine to the Docker image. Step 2. Initial Docker Compose file. Next, we will create a Docker Compose configuration for our project. Docker Compose is a tool that allows us to run our Docker image easily from our project location. Basically, it allows us to easily manage the different services that combine with our project. This configuration locates in a file within the root level of our project called docker-compose.yml and contains the configuration for all of the services that make up our project. The first line of Docker Compose configuration is the version of Docker Compose that we are going to be writing our file for, and then we define the services for our application below. At this point, we only need one service for our Django application, which is app. So we named the service app, and then we are going to build the sections going to build the section of the configuration by setting the context to dot symbol, which represents our current directory that running Docker Compose from. And the port configuration maps our project from port 8000 on our host to port 8000 on our image. Below the ports, we are adding volumes, which allows us to get the updates in real time that we make to our project into our Docker image. Finally, define the commands that's used to run the application inside the Docker container. So these commands is going to be migrate and just run the server, and that's it. Once you all set, build the compose file by docker compose build command, and you will see that it's going to be built successfully without any errors, because we didn't do that much. So after this step, we are going to create our Django project. Step 3. Create a Django project. We use Docker Compose to run a command on our image that contains the Django dependency and that will create the project files that we need for our app. So we will run the command on app, and then anything you pass in after is going to be treated as a command. So it's going to be docker-compose run app sh-c and Django admin start project app. And at the end we are putting dot. The reason we add sh-c option is to make it clear to C command that you are running on versus all the Docker Compose command. It's also possible to run it without this option, but it's a good practice to separate the actual command. Once you run it, a new Django project will be created inside the app directory. Step 4. Setting up database. We will add a new service in Docker Compose file called db, which represents the Postgres database and pulls Postgres image from Docker Hub with the Alpine version tag. Then we are going to set up environment variables for the database name, username, password that's created once our database service starts. So we will define the list of environment variables under a block called environment. So db image is going to be Postgres 10-alpine. Environment variable is going to be Postgres_db equals app. Postgres underscore user is going to be, let's just name it Postgres. And Postgres underscore password is going to be, let's say it's super secret password, since we are doing it in our local environment. And the port is going to be 5432. Now that we have created our DB service, we can modify our app service to set some environment variables and also depend it on our DB service. Let's start by adding some environment variables to our app. The first environment variable is db_host. It's the name of service that runs our database, and that's going to be db basically. The next variable is db_name. Postgres DB name, so that's going to be app. DB_user, this is the username, which is Postgres. DB_pass, that is the password that we created, which is super secret password. Okay, so now we have Docker all set up, so we can continue by configuring the Django project to use it with the Postgres database. And the final step, replace the SQLite configuration with Postgres in settings.py file. By this way, we are getting all variables directly from the environment to make our settings more secure. Finally, let's run the Docker and see if our app is running properly. So docker-compose up --build. Okay, so it's a really big part coming right now. In this part, we are going to add a management command to the core app of our Django project. The management command is going to be a helper command that allows us to wait for the database to be available before continuing and running other commands. This command will be used in our Docker compose file when starting our Django app. The reason that we need this command because sometimes when using Postgres with Docker compose in a Django app, it fails to start because of database error. It turns out that once the Postgres service has started, there are few extra setup tasks that need to be done on the Postgres before it's ready to accept connections. Basically, the Django app will try and connect to the database before the database is ready, and therefore it will fail with an exception. First, let's create a new app named core, and then we will add it into installed apps configuration in settings.py. Okay, so let's create our new app, docker-compose, run app sh -c, and then Django admin start app core. And then we're going to add the app name into installed apps configuration. Okay, so to create the command, we are going to start by creating a new directory in our core app that we are going to store our management commands. So this is the Django convention, and it's recommended on the Django website to put all of your commands in a directory called management and then /commands. So we are going to start by creating a folder called management and make sure that it locates in the actual core app folder. In each of these folders, create a new init.py file to make sure that this is picked up as a Python module. We can add the custom name of the command that we want to create, but for now the command is going to be called wait_for_db.py, and we are going to start by importing the time model, which comes up with standard Python library that we can use to make our application sleep for a few seconds in between each database check. Simply add the following code snippet into the command file. Actually, I don't want to explain this part, but let me quickly tell you what's going on here. A Django framework allows to import base command class, which is essentially all management commands originate. By using the base class, the project mechanism becomes accessible and all command arguments can be called in response. So the command file name is used to trigger the command line utility, or simply it can be called by a compose file to automate and check if the PostgreSQL is ready before starting the database service. This is a bit different topic to actually explain this part, but at least you know that this command is going to make the database, actually the Django server to wait until the database becomes available. Now, each time we start our project, this command needs to be executed. So let's add this in our compose file under the commands block. Great. Now, if you run the containers, the command will force the app to wait until the database becomes active. We covered all initial configurations so far, and you can use compose file for future projects as a starting point if your project will include this tech stack. So this is the main part of our tutorial. Finally, in this part we will add Redis and Celery services to our compose file. There are a few tricky points while configuring Celery due to the database connection, or let's say credentials. However, before we add the services, let's add a new file named celery.py into our Django project directory. So as I said before, I'm not going to explain what's going on here. This is just simple Celery configuration. You can find a bit more explanation if you just Google it, but I don't want to waste time by explaining each line of this code here, because the main concept here is DevOps, like how to integrate Redis, Celery, Docker, and everything like that. So I will pass this part, okay? I just can say that basically it will discover all tasks alongside the project and will pass them to the queue. That's all. Next, we also need to update init.py file inside the current directory, which is our Django project. This is the another, how I can say, usual configuration of the Celery. And finally, Celery requires broker URL for tasks. So in this case, we will use Redis as a message broker. Well, open your settings file and add the following configurations at the end of your settings. Great, now let's update the compose file by adding the Redis and Celery services. Okay, so let's add a new service named Redis, and image is going to be Redis Alpine. It's going to pull from that image. The Redis configuration is very simple, that's it. And next service we're going to add Celery, and we are defining that always restart the Celery service when we run the Docker Compose up. And after that, of course, it's building build context dot, and finally command is going to be Celery-a app worker-l info. This is the how to say, this is the command to run Celery. And that's it. Then we are adding volumes as usual. As you noticed, we added an environment block under the Celery service, and the reason is Celery must access the database while running. If we don't provide the database credentials, then it will throw a connection exception. Believe me, I spent like 2 days for researching it, and finally I'm sharing this impossible programming with you. At the end of the compose file, you will see depends on block, which means the Celery will wait for the services below in order to become active. As you see, we are frequently using environment variables. At this point, we can make our configuration file more secure by adding environment files. The main objective is here to keep the code clean and managed for further development process. To achieve that, create a new file in the root level of project, not inside Django project, but like root level of the project, alongside with Dockerfile, named .env.dev, for example, and simply copy the variables there. Once you copy it, then it's possible to get variables directly from the environment file by using env_file block inside compose file. The final configuration of Docker Compose file will look like this. Now, if you run the Docker Compose again, everything is going to be same, but our variables will more secure inside the environment file. Alright devs, in this video you learned how to combine Redis and Celery with Dockerized Django web application. And additionally, you can configure the Celery beat schedule to perform certain tasks periodically. You can Google it, Celery beat schedule, and you can implement it to your project very easily. Okay, so maybe I missed some explanation parts in this video, but believe me, I don't want to explain each line of code since this tutorials is not for beginners. It's for intermediate and advanced level Django developers, web developers, Python web developers, whatever is that. That's why please don't blame me in comments that you didn't explain this part, because sometimes I can see that in Instagram comments, YouTube comments, that you are saying that, hey, you didn't explain this part. I know, but if I'm going to explain it, the video is going to be very long, and people, which is like you, will not watch it because it's very long. In my experience, if the video is too long, I need the solution to find the solution as soon as possible. If the video is too long, I'm saying, okay, this guy is just explaining a very long everything. I don't need that. That's why I will keep it as short as possible. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe my YouTube channel, because it's still like 1K subs, but I think we can make it 2K in a short period of time. Okay, so thank you for watching. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, and see you in the next impossible programming video. See you later. Goodbye.